The alley. The rain fell like cold needles on Elena's back as she lifted the lid of another dumpster. Behind her, 5-year-old Mila held a torn plastic bag, her small fingers purple from the November cold. She didn't complain. She never complained. That was the part that broke Elena's heart the most. "Mama, look," Mila whispered, pointing at a cardboard box filled with barely expired bread from the bakery 2 blocks over. "We're lucky tonight." Lucky. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second. Her daughter thought finding bread in the trash was luck. What kind of mother had she become? "Good eyes, baby girl," Elena said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Put it in the bag. We'll make toast tomorrow." It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Elena had finished her cleaning shift at the hospital at 10. Before that, she'd worked 6 hours at the laundromat. Tomorrow she'd do it all again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Because that's what you did when you were alone in this world with a child depending on you. They moved to the next alley, the one behind the Italian restaurant that sometimes threw out perfectly good pasta. Elena had memorized the garbage schedules of 12 different businesses. She knew which nights to come, which dumpsters to check, which bags contained food and which contained waste. Survival had made her an expert in things she never wanted to learn. "Stay close," Elena told Mila as they turned the corner. The alley was darker here. The streetlight had been broken for weeks. Elena pulled out her phone, using its dim light to guide them. That's when she saw it. A hand. A man's hand, pale and motionless, extending from between 2 garbage bags. Elena's first instinct was to grab Mila and run. This was the city. This was the kind of neighborhood where bodies appeared and questions were never asked. She'd learned early that seeing nothing kept you alive. But then the hand moved. Fingers curled weakly against the wet pavement. A sound emerged. Not quite a groan. More like a breath fighting to exist. "Mama," Mila tugged at Elena's coat. "He's hurt. We should go, baby." "But he's hurt." Elena looked at her daughter. At those eyes that still believed in goodness despite everything. At the small face that hadn't yet learned that helping strangers in alleys could get you killed. "Don't do this," her survival instinct screamed. "Walk away. This isn't your problem." But she was already moving forward, pulling the garbage bags aside to reveal the man beneath. He was in his late 40s, maybe 50. Silver-streaked dark hair matted with blood. An expensive suit, or what had once been expensive, now torn and soaked through. His face was swollen, purple with bruises. Someone had beaten him badly. Someone had thrown him away like trash. His eyes flickered open. Dark eyes, almost black, filled with pain and something else. Surprise. No one had ever come back for him. "Please," his voice cracked. "My phone. In the jacket. Call." He couldn't finish. His eyes rolled back, consciousness slipping away. Elena knew she had a choice. She could search his pockets, find his phone, make a call, and walk away. Let someone else handle this. Let someone else carry this weight. Instead, she said, "Mila, help Mama. We need to lift him." The devil they saved. His name was Marco Valentini. Elena didn't know this yet. What she knew was that he was too heavy, that her one-room apartment was too small, and that the man lying unconscious on her floor probably needed a hospital. But hospitals meant questions. Questions meant police. And something told her that whoever had done this to him wouldn't appreciate official involvement. So she did what she could with what she had. Warm water, clean rags, The first aid kit she'd stolen from the hospital supply closet months ago. Stolen because Mila's school required children to have emergency medical supplies, and she couldn't afford to buy them. Elena cleaned his wounds. She stitched a gash on his forehead using a sewing needle and dental floss, the way her grandmother had taught her back in Ukraine before she'd emigrated alone at 19. She wrapped his bruised ribs with torn bedsheets. And through it all, Mila watched. Is he going to die, Mama? Not if I can help it. Is he a good person? Elena paused. The man's hands were scarred, not from labor, but from violence. The kind of scars that came from a life she'd only ever seen glimpses of in movies. I don't know, sweetheart, but we help people when they need help. That's who we are. Mila nodded, accepting this as children accept truths from their mothers, completely and without question. She walked over to the unconscious man and placed her small hand on his forehead. Don't worry, mister, she whispered. Mama fixed me when I was sick too. She's good at fixing. 1,200 miles away in another life, Marco Valentini had been the most feared man in 3 states. He'd built his empire from nothing. From the streets of Brooklyn, where he'd grown up hungry, where his father had gambled away every dollar and his mother had worked herself to death by 42. He'd sworn as a boy that he would never be powerless again, and he'd kept that promise. By 30, he controlled the docks. By 40, he controlled the unions, the judges, half the police force, and businesses that stretched from New York to Chicago. His name was spoken in whispers. His orders were followed without question. Men begged for his mercy. Women wanted his attention. Politicians sought his favor. Marco Valentini had everything, and Marco Valentini had nothing. His wife had left him 15 years ago, taking their daughter. A daughter who now refused to speak to him, who'd changed her last name, who looked at him with disgust the one time he tried to see her. His brothers in the organization called him Padre, but they were not sons. They were wolves waiting for him to show weakness, which he did. He made the mistake of trusting. His consigliere Romano, a man he'd known for 30 years, a man he'd saved from prison twice, a man he'd treated like blood, had decided that 30 years of loyalty was worth less than the money from a rival family. The betrayal came on a quiet Tuesday. Marco had been driving home from a meeting when the SUV boxed him in. When the doors opened. When he saw Romano's face in the dim light. Nothing personal, Marco, Romano had said. Business changes. You understand. He understood. He understood that he was going to die. They'd beaten him, questioned him about accounts and codes and safe houses. When he wouldn't talk, they'd beaten him more. And when they finally got bored, they'd driven him across state lines and dumped him in an alley behind an Italian restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on him. As consciousness faded, Marco Valentini accepted his death. In a way, it was almost a relief. 52 years of fighting, of climbing, of building walls so high that not even God could see over them. And for what? To die alone in the garbage. At least it would be over. But then small fingers touched his forehead. And a child's voice whispered, "Don't worry, mister. Mama's good at fixing." And for the first time in decades, Marco Valentini wanted to live. Awakening. He woke to the smell of bread toasting. For a moment, Marco thought he was dead. That this was some strange afterlife. A small room, warm light. A woman's humming. Then the pain hit. His ribs screamed. His head throbbed. Every muscle in his body announced its presence through agony. But pain meant alive. You're awake. Elena stood in the doorway of what he now recognized as a tiny kitchen. She was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that looked older than her face. She was beautiful in the way that survival is beautiful, stripped of vanity, forged in necessity. Where? His voice cracked. My apartment. Don't worry, it's not much, but it's warm. She brought him water. You've been out for almost 2 days. I was starting to think I'd have to figure out how to explain a body. He tried to sit up. Failed. Tried again. Stop, Elena said firmly. Your ribs are damaged. Move too fast and you'll puncture something. You a doctor? No. But I've put enough people back together to know when someone should stay down. She paused. Including myself. He looked at her. Really looked. The slight hunch in her shoulders from years of physical labor. The calluses on her palms. The way she held herself, guarded but not afraid. Why did you help me? My daughter saw you. She asked me to. And you listen to everything your daughter says? When she's right, yes. As if summoned, a small face appeared around Elena's legs. The girl from his memory, the voice that had told him not to worry. Hi, mister, Mila said. Are you feeling better? Marco stared at the child. She was tiny, with her mother's dark hair and someone else's green eyes. She wore pajamas with cartoon rabbits on them, clearly too small, the sleeves ending inches above her wrists. Yes, he heard himself say. Better. Mila smiled. A smile so pure it almost hurt to see. She walked over to him and placed something on the mattress beside him. A crayon drawing. A stick figure man lying down, and 2 stick figure girls standing beside him. Above them, a crooked heart. That's you, Mila explained, pointing. And that's me and Mama. We're a team now. Marco looked at the drawing. At this child who saw a beaten stranger in the garbage and decided to make him family. Something cracked in his chest. Not his ribs. Something deeper. The debt. Days became a week. Marco healed slowly, slower than he would have in his younger years. Elena worked her shifts and Mila went to kindergarten, and somehow this tiny apartment that could barely fit 2 now accommodated 3. He told them nothing about himself. Elena didn't ask. She was smart enough to know that questions had prices, and some prices were too high to pay. But Marco watched. He watched Elena leave at 5 a.m. and return at midnight. He watched her give Mila the larger portions of food while claiming she wasn't hungry. He watched her count coins at the kitchen table. Her face tight with worry she never let her daughter see. He watched Mila teach him to play card games, her tiny fingers barely able to hold the cards. He watched her fall asleep beside him while he read to her from books so worn the covers had fallen off. He watched her kiss his forehead every night before bed, just as she did to her mother. "Good night, Mr. Marco," she would say. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here." In 52 years, no one had ever thanked him for existing. On the 8th day, Elena came home crying. She didn't know he was watching. She thought he was asleep. She sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands and wept silently, the kind of crying that had learned to be quiet because noise was a luxury. The next morning, when she and Mila were gone, Marco found the letter. Eviction notice. 3 months behind on rent. 2 weeks to vacate. In the margins, Elena had written numbers. Calculations. How much she owed. How much she made. No matter how she ran the figures, they never added up. Marco looked around the apartment. At the single mattress where Elena and Mila slept. At the makeshift bed on the floor where he'd been recovering. At the refrigerator that contained bread, eggs, and hope. These people had saved his life. Had fed him. had given him a place to heal, and they were going to lose everything. The call. Marco made the call that afternoon. Not to Romano. Not to the men who'd tried to kill him. To someone else. An old friend in Chicago who owed him favors that couldn't be counted. Valentini. The voice on the other end was thick with disbelief. They're saying you're dead. They're wrong. A pause. What do you need? Information. Romano's movements. His new partners. Everything. You're going after him? Marco looked at Mila's crayon drawing, still sitting on the mattress beside him. The stick figures. The crooked heart. I'm taking back what's mine. It won't be easy. He's got protection now. The Morellis are backing him. I don't need easy. I need clean. Another pause. And after? You coming back? Marco was silent for a long time. I don't know, he finally said. Maybe some things aren't worth coming back to. He left 3 nights later. He didn't say goodbye. He couldn't. If he saw Mila's face, he would stay. And if he stayed, he would bring danger to their door. Romano's people were looking for him. It was only a matter of time before they tracked him to this neighborhood, this building, this family. The only way to protect them was to disappear. But before he left, he did 2 things. First, he placed an envelope under Elena's pillow. Inside was enough cash to pay off the back rent, clear her debts, and keep her and Mila safe for years. Second, he wrote a note. Some debts can never be repaid. I'll spend my life trying anyway. Keep her safe. Keep her kind. The world needs more people like your daughter. And more people like you. The choice. Elena found the envelope the next morning. Her first instinct was to throw it away. This was blood money. It had to be. No honest man carried this kind of cash. But then she looked at Mila, who was sitting at the table eating breakfast, and she thought about the eviction notice, and the winter coming, and the holes in her daughter's shoes. She kept the money, but she also did something else. She hired a private investigator. It cost her $200 she could barely spare. But she needed to know who Marco Valentini really was. The answer came a week later. You should have left him in that alley, the investigator said, his face pale. This man. Do you have any idea what he's done? Elena read the file. The arrests that never led to convictions. The connections to violence, extortion, money laundering. The nickname whispered in certain circles. The Wolf of the East. She should have been horrified. She should have been terrified. But all she could think about was the way Marco had looked at Mila when she gave him that drawing. The way his eyes had filled with something fragile and broken. The way he'd read to her daughter every night, doing all the voices, making her laugh. People were not only their worst moments. She had to believe that. She had to. Blood and silence. Marco moved through the next 3 weeks like a ghost. He made calls, gathered allies, found the people still loyal to the old ways, and there were more of them than Romano had expected. Betrayal bred betrayal, and Romano had made enemies of his own. The confrontation came on a Thursday, not with violence or not the kind Marco had once been known for. He'd spent decades building power through fear. Now he dismantled Romano's empire through something simpler. Truth. The books Romano had been doctoring. The money he'd been skimming. The deals he'd made that would cost the Morelli family far more than they'd gain. Marco didn't need to pull a trigger. He just needed to ensure the Morellis saw what Romano really was. The rest took care of itself. Romano called him the night before he disappeared. You could have killed me, Romano said. His voice was hollow, the voice of a man who knew what was coming. Why didn't you? Marco thought about the question. A year ago, even a month ago, he would have answered differently. He would have wanted Romano to suffer, would have wanted to watch the light leave his eyes. But now, there's a little girl, Marco said slowly, 5 years old. She found me in an alley and decided I was worth saving. She drew me a picture with a heart on it and told me we were a team. Romano was silent. I looked at that picture every day for a week, Marco continued, and I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be in it. What kind of man was worth drawing. He paused. The man I used to be would have killed you slowly and enjoyed it. But that's not the man in the picture. So you get to live. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm trying to become someone who deserves that heart. He hung up, and for the first time in decades, Marco Valentini felt something he barely recognized. Peace. Coming home. It was Christmas Eve when Elena heard the knock. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her few friends were scattered across the city, working their own holiday shifts. Mila was asleep, worn out from the excitement of the small tree Elena had managed to buy with Marco's money. She opened the door. He was thinner than before, older looking, but his eyes were different, clearer somehow, like someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. I didn't know if you'd want to see me, Marco said quietly, after you found out who I was. Elena looked at him for a long moment. I know who you were, she said. The question is who you are now. I don't know the answer to that yet. Then why are you here? Marco reached into his coat and pulled out a small wrapped box. Because it's Christmas. And I promised your daughter we were a team. He paused. If that offer still stands. Elena should have said no. Should have closed the door and protected what she'd built. Should have remembered every lesson life had taught her about trusting men with dark pasts and dangerous eyes. But then she heard small footsteps behind her. Mr. Marco. Mila flew past Elena's legs and launched herself at Marco with the full force of a 5-year-old's love. He caught her, barely, his ribs still tender, and held her tight. You came back, Mila whispered into his shoulder. I knew you would. I knew it. How? Marco's voice was rough. How did you know? Mila pulled back and looked at him with those impossible green eyes. Because, she said simply, you're family now, and family always comes home. After. They didn't become a family overnight. These things take time. Trust has to be built moment by moment, choice by choice. Elena kept her guard up for months. Marco slept on the floor, then the couch, then slowly, carefully, earned his way into something like belonging. He got a job, a real one, managing accounts for a construction company. Legitimate work. The kind of work that would have made his younger self laugh with contempt. But his younger self had never known what it felt like to walk Mila to school. To see her face light up when she got a good grade. To hear her call him Papa Marco for the first time. Her voice uncertain, testing the word. His younger self had never known what it felt like to sit across from Elena at dinner and realize that the ache in his chest wasn't pain anymore. It was love. The kind of love that didn't demand. The kind that didn't possess. The kind that asked only for the chance to exist in the same room as another person and count itself blessed. Years passed. Mila grew from 5 to 10 to 15. She became strong and kind and fierce, exactly the kind of person her mother had raised her to be. She called Elena Mom and Marco Dad without hesitation, without asterisks. Elena finished the nursing degree she'd abandoned when Mila was born. She worked at the same hospital she'd once cleaned floors in, this time wearing scrubs and saving lives. And Marco became someone new. He volunteered at youth centers in the neighborhood. He mentored young men who reminded him too much of himself. Angry, hungry, convinced that power was the only path to survival. He told them his story. All of it. The violence and the emptiness and the alley where he'd been thrown away like garbage. And then he told them about the woman who saved him anyway. Love is not a weakness, he would say. It's the only strength that matters. Took me 52 years to learn that. Don't make my mistake. The heart. It was a Sunday morning when Marco found the old drawing. Mila was 16 now, packing for a summer program at a university. She'd gotten a scholarship, full ride, and Elena and Marco couldn't stop crying about it. But in the chaos of packing, Marco had found a box under Mila's bed. And inside the box, preserved in plastic, was the crayon drawing from 11 years before. The stick figure man lying down. The two stick figures standing beside him. The crooked heart above. You kept it, he said, his voice catching. Mila looked up. She was a woman now, almost. But when she smiled, he still saw the 5-year-old who'd found him in the rain. Of course I kept it, she said. It's the most important drawing I ever made. Why? Mila walked over and took the drawing from his hands. She studied it the way you study something sacred. Because this is the moment everything changed, she said. This is when I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about looking at someone the world has thrown away and deciding they're worth saving. She looked at him. You taught me that, Dad. You and Mom. Every single day. Marco tried to speak. Couldn't. Mila hugged him, not the way children hug, but the way adults do when they understand what words cannot say. I love you, she whispered. Thank you for staying. Marco held his daughter. The girl who'd found him in the garbage and drawn a heart around them all. Thank you, he whispered back, for making me worth staying for. Outside, the city moved on. Taxis honked. People hurried. The world spun in its endless cycles of joy and sorrow, meeting and parting, loss and love. But in one small apartment, not the same one from years ago, but still simple, still warm, a family sat together at a kitchen table. Elena, her hair now touched with gray. Marco, his face lined but peaceful. And Mila, ready to step into her future. Promise me something, Elena said, reaching across the table to take both their hands. Anything, Marco and Mila said together. Promise me we'll always come back to this table. No matter where life takes us. No matter what happens. This table is home. Mila smiled. Marco smiled. Always, they said. And outside, the rain began to fall. The same rain that had fallen 11 years ago in a dark alley, when a little girl looked at a broken man and saw someone worth saving. The same rain. But everything else had changed.